the name of the values that keep you alive, do not let your vision of man be distorted by the ugly, the cowardly, the mindless, and those who have never achieved his title. Do not lose your knowledge that man's proper estate is an upright posture, an intransigent mind, and a step that travels on limited roads. Do not let your fire go out. Spark might replace the spark, and the hopeless swamps of the approximate, the not quite, the not yet, the not at all. The world you desired can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It's yours.
Welcome to the Cryptoconomy podcast. This is your host, Enrique. Today we're going to be talking about quantum computing and the risk it poses on cryptocurrencies. Decentralized ledgers are secure and unbreakable until quantum computing emerges. The quantum supremacy race between China, US, and Europe is on, as quantum computers are coming faster than anticipated. Adam Koltun, an evangelist for quantum-resistant ledger, is joining us today to discuss the quantum technology threat and security challenges for distributed ledgers and what it means for the cryptocurrency landscape. Adam, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about how you got involved in this quantum world?
Yeah, well, originally I got involved in the cryptocurrency world, which is sort of what led me to this intersection of quantum computing and blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies. And basically, about 2 years ago, my life was very different. I was in law school. I was on my way to becoming, a lawyer. And that was my career track. I was at the end of my first year of law school. That's sort of when, you take stock of things, because law school is only 3 years. And basically, long story short, I realized that while I enjoyed a lot of the things I was being taught, I did not have the passion that a lot of my fellow students had, and that was going to become a pretty big issue once I got out into the professional world. And so I stopped. I walked away from that, decided not to take on any more student debt for a degree I wasn't going to properly utilize, and then was sort of at a crossroads. What do I do with my life? Where do I go from here? The thing I thought I was going to be doing for the next 30 years, I'm not going to be doing. That's when a friend of mine that had been sort of buzzing around my ears with, talking about all this magic internet money, really sort of sat me down and was like, hey, Adam, you really should take a look at this. It's pretty groundbreaking technology. And he was just talking about just blockchain in general, not any specific cryptocurrency or anything like that. Full disclosure, I have a liberal arts background. I have a degree in anthropology and a degree in American studies, which sort of explains my difficulty in finding a job out of college.
I feel that. I recently graduated from the School of Liberal Arts as well at UT.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful way to grow your mind, and it's a wonderful way to gain perspective on the world. It just is not the best way to get a job. And obviously, as you well know, as soon as you leave college, especially in the United States, 4 weeks later, the payments start ticking.
Yep.
And yeah. So, in any case, I started in the cryptocurrency space as a trader initially.
Okay.
I got a Bittrex account, I got a Gemini account, a Coinbase account, and I started trading around. Eventually, a different friend of mine who had been a pre-sale participant in QRL's pre-sale in April of 2017, around May or June, said, hey, I got in on this project. It's going to hit exchanges soon. You should check it out, and there's a lot of upside to it. So I started trading it over the summer. I ended up, as everybody else did, in the summer of 2017, I went into the project Slack, and I talked to some of the developers. And eventually, there was an opening in the project for a marketing manager, somebody to handle basically all the non-technical stuff to do with the project. And I didn't put send them my resume, but what I did do is make a little document of questions they should probably ask the guy that they're going to end up hiring, because the two project leaders, who are very intelligent, are not marketing professionals. They are, developmentally oriented and focused individuals that have a very deep understanding of technical matters. But this is just something they weren't familiar with. So I wrote them a little thing, and then basically the long and short turned into them sort of being like, hey, would you want to maybe do this yourself? You have the background and you're in our Slack all day, so we know you don't have a day job. And I was like, you're right on both counts. I worked in marketing previously before law school. I'm 29 years old, so there was a number of years in there between graduating from undergrad and starting law school. And I did a lot of marketing then, but I was marketing things that I wasn't terribly passionate about, and so I was not great at my job, and didn't think I had a future in the industry. And so in August, I sort of came on in probationary capacity, and then in September I went part-time, and then in December I went full-time. And so since then, the past 6 months, I've been full-time for the quantum resistant ledger, and yeah, that's kind of how I found myself talking about the intersection of quantum computing and blockchain. It was a winding road. I'm not really sure how else one would get.
Were you at all interested in quantum computing before you learned about QRL?
I mean, in the same way that I think, lasers and teleportation and
Right.
all the
It seems
stuff
like
in Star
sci-fi
Trek
doesn't
is
seem
really
like
cool.
it's.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard of quantum computers before. I knew that they were not like normal computers, and I didn't know whether or not, like a lot of people I talked to, I didn't know whether it was even possible. I thought it was still mostly a theoretical construction. And, after I read the white paper for QRL, I realized, no, they're actually making these, they're making these computers now. And granted, it's sort of in a similar situation as traditional computing in the 1960s, namely, the computers take up a whole room. They break fairly easily, and they're not super useful yet. But, similar to traditional computing, I think that, as the years go on, they're going to become quite useful and quite necessary for many industries, and will completely change many industries.
So is QRL attempting to, so say the day emerges where suddenly quantum computing is accessible to a bunch of miners, is QRL going to give this or sell this technology to other blockchains, or are they trying to develop proprietary quantum resistant consensus algorithms that they only want to keep for themselves?
So, yeah, we're definitely not keeping things for ourselves only. We're an open source project from start to finish. After release, before release, from the very first day of development, you can go on our GitHub right now, root around in our code base, make pull requests if you like. So definitely not trying to make a proprietary scheme in that sense of the word. Obviously, we're the people that are making our blockchain. We think we know it and the code base better than anyone else, but it is an open source project. Secondly, we're not really addressing the quantum miner problem, if you want to call it that, as some do, for a number of reasons. One, both for our chain and in the industry in general, we think that there is going to be a migration away from proof of work over the next few years for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. We're launching as proof of work. We were originally intending on launching as proof of stake back when the white paper was written, but we realized at a certain point that basically the main thing holding up our developmental progress from hitting sort of the gates we wanted to was proof of stake. And so we decided to push it off until after launch, but we will be sort of getting right back onto working on proof of stake once we've launched our network. So yeah, the quantum miner problem is not the thing that we address. What we address is, in my opinion, a much more fundamental issue to the security of blockchain networks, which is the signature scheme, your public key, private key pair. Quantum computers pose a very direct and material threat to that, the security of that scheme, and that is what we most directly address when we talk about quantum resistance.
Right. So in the traditional finance or banking paradigm, you're the most important person. So you lose your card, forget your PIN or whatever, you can go in and regain access to your account. But in the cryptocurrency world, you're not the most important thing. Your private key is, and it's that key pair holding onto that private key that really allows you to authorize transactions. So the idea is that quantum computing can come around, and suddenly that key pair can be easily predicted or can be easily broken. So how is it?
So what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what it is it's factorization, right? So the public key private key pair that you use in Bitcoin, Ethereum, any derivatives thereof, and certainly a number of other chains, is what's known as ECDSA, which stands for the elliptic curve distributed signature algorithm. And what that, so all security has assumptions, right? You build a tall fence, you assume that people don't have ladders. You build, a glass house, you assume people don't have stones. With ECDSA, the assumption is that traditional computers cannot factor very large numbers in a human amount of time. Like technically it's possible, but it would take tens of thousands of years using the fastest computers on the planet. So that's functional security, and that's the assumption. A sufficiently powerful quantum computer running Shor's algorithm would be able to factor a very, very large number in an actionable amount of time. Now, whether that's a handful of hours or a handful of days or even a handful of weeks, that's still enough time to greatly disrupt these systems, because these systems are predicated under an assumption of permanent security. So that's the sort of rub with a decentralized system versus a centralized system. A centralized system, the bank can take your money. Granted, we have FDIC and these other things, but just to be sort of abstract, a banker can take your money. Because ultimately they're the one that's unlocking the safe for you when you go to withdraw your funds. The situation we have with blockchain, any blockchain, is much more like a mailbox. There's a slot in the front and there's a key in the back, except there's no master key. There's just the key that you have. And so if you lose that key, you're totally right. If you lose that key, you're SOL, you're out of luck. There's no way for you to get back into your mailbox, or in this case, wallet. And that's what makes quantum computing such a unique challenge for blockchain technologies. Unlike Gmail, for example, which I use for my personal email, if Google wants to change their security apparatus on the back end, they don't need my consent. Right. They don't need my awareness, knowledge, or participation. I just log in the next day and suddenly everything's different, but I don't even know that because I can't see the back end that Google is working with.
So do you think something like that would also be true in the crypto world if suddenly like this quantum resistant technology became available to everyone? Do you think that all these wallets and they could just flip a switch and suddenly be quantum resistant and the user doesn't even have to know anything about quantum?
Well, see, that's the problem, right? So there's no way to use, I'm not trying to target Bitcoin here, but just to use as a stand-in of a blockchain. I have a Bitcoin wallet. Sure, quite possibly you do too. Nobody knows my private key except for me, I hope. And if they wanted to change my address type, there's no way for anyone to move my Bitcoin funds out of my wallet without my help, without my private key. So there's absolutely no way for a decentralized ledger or system or blockchain to universally migrate all of its wallets without some sort of participatory action on the part of the wallet owners.
Okay.
And not only does that create a problem of millions of people that all have wallets all over the world, all needing to coordinate action, which is very, very difficult, if not functionally impossible, but also any lost keys, any lost wallets, any of those examples of somebody mining a bunch of cryptocurrency on a hard drive and then forgetting it or formatting it and throwing it in a dump, and the private key being permanently lost, none of those wallets can be migrated. So therefore, they will all be vulnerable once the signature scheme is cracked. So it creates quite a thorny issue in the blockchain environment, which luckily we don't have to deal with because we haven't launched our own network.
That's yet. A really interesting issue. So because it does seem like reality. Quantum computers are being turned on this year. They're getting stable enough to actually be able to be used to perform calculations. So in the case that quantum computing becomes accessible enough for it to be realistically used to attack cryptocurrencies, it seems like somebody's eventually going to have to say like, hey, it's time to switch over, and only the people who still have access to their private keys are going to be able to manage that switch. So that means there's going to be more scarcity for these tokens.
Quite possibly. It really is a very thorny issue, and like I said, we don't particularly have the answer because we don't have that exact problem. We have the benefit of being able to use a metaphor. We have the benefit of being able to waterproof our boat on land and not having to do it in the middle of the ocean.
I like that.
Which a lot of these legacy blockchains don't have the privilege of. mostly just because when they were, 10 years ago when Bitcoin first started, the question of quantum computing was a question of if, like, is it even
Right.
possible? The only quantum computers that existed had only a handful of qubits, which is the corollary to a bit in normal computing is a qubit in quantum computing. There were only these systems of a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 qubits, rubbing together, and they would break very quickly, and they weren't useful for anything. And people were wondering, is this technology even viable? So obviously nobody was thinking about how it might intersect with blockchain, which was also a technology that was just in its infancy. But today, with the benefit of hindsight and a little bit more acute foresight, we're able to recognize that these two technologies are headed for a path of intersection and are able to sort of like make these changes from the ground up, which is always easier than adding in changes later.
Yep. So, just to be sure I understand, so quantum computing really only poses a threat to crypto or to a blockchain if it's available only to one actor, right? If it's broadly available, then it's no different than any other like technology you have. It would be analogous to the switch a couple of years ago from FPGA to ASIC. If everybody suddenly had access to quantum computing, now everybody can compete with this, or would it completely break? It doesn't rely on only one person having access to this technology.
I think it's a mixture of the two, if we're being honest.
Okay.
Now, that this is a point of debate, so I'm not going to speak as if I do the sole authority on this, but it's kind of like firearms to a certain extent. Firearms are understood in certain cultural contexts to be the great equalizer. But the way they equalize is by giving everybody the ability to kill one another. They don't have a directly defensive application. They are, in the context, of cryptography, quantum computing as we understand it, and as it will probably exist over the next few development cycles, is a penetrative or offensive technology. It's something that breaks cryptography. There is talks of people trying to use quantum computers once they're sufficiently powerful enough to create new types of cryptography. And I think that's very, very interesting, but that's not what we do at QRL. What we do at QRL is trying to deal with the offensive or penetrative capability and sort of potential of quantum computers as it relates to blockchain technology. So if everybody had a quantum computer, everybody would be able to crack each other's blockchains, but nobody would necessarily be any closer to securing them. So what we do is trying to protect the blockchain technology, well, our interpretation of blockchain technology and cryptocurrency from the inevitability of quantum computing. In the past 5-10 years, quantum computing has gone from a question of if to a question of when. And we are sort of one of the many technological responses to that shift in determination.
Okay, so then just clarifying, you said at QRL you guys are focusing on the signing algorithm, not the hashing algorithm, and that's really what you want to focus on, making quantum resistant. So what is the alternative to the elliptic curve? What is the quantum resistant?
So there are a number of quantum resistant or post quantum, depending on how you want to refer to it, types of cryptography that are in either development or that exist already in some form today. Just to give a brief list, and this is not an exhaustive list, there's lattice-based, multivariate, hash-based, which is what we use, code-based. Those are like the most common or popular, I guess you could say. Top 4 sort of types of alternative and potentially quantum resistant or post-quantum cryptographic schemes. However, they have wildly different applications in technology, and we believe that hash-based cryptography is most applicable to blockchains specifically. That's why we use it. And so that's sort of our answer to what do you do in the face of quantum computing when you're talking about a signature scheme.
But
what do you do instead of ECDSA? And our answer is you use hash-based cryptography.
Okay.
Specifically, a combination of two sort of mathematical elements, one being Winternitz one-time signatures,
Okay.
and the other being the extended Merkle signature scheme, or XMSS. We didn't develop either of these two things. They're named after their creators. They, are mathematical algorithms and elements and theorems that have existed. I think the earliest one was written in the 1970s. And they've been well vetted and have applications, I would argue, and I think many would as well, outside of blockchain technology as well as inside.
So to the end user,
that's how we disrupt that.
So you guys are just using a different algorithm to produce like this signing mechanism. So to the end user, would I still have a private key in a post-quantum world?
Yes. So yeah, that's a very good point. We're certainly not asking our users to take 10,000 private keys, write them all out on a piece of paper, and then cross them off with a Sharpie each time they sign into their wallet or something. That would be that would be ripe for comedy, but not terribly useful. No, you'll still have a password, private key, a mnemonic phrase, as is increasingly becoming popular, to access your wallet. In terms of UI or user experience, UX, very similar to like I don't know, like a My Ether wallet or a My Crypto or something like that. You go on a website, you're prompted to enter in your key. It unlocks your wallet. You have a list of tokens on the side that you can toggle on and off if you want to send those, or you can send the main currency. In this case, for our chain, obviously QRL. Yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful things about technology, I've always thought, is that the technology can completely change, but the shape can remain the same. Like, I have a television, no big deal. But I have a television, and what's inside my television is completely dissimilar than what was inside my parents' television in the 1950s. Gone are the big tubes. Gone is the TV being a cube, as deep as it is tall as it is wide.
Right.
But it still does the same thing. I'm still pointing a remote at it. I'm hitting a button to turn it on. I'm pushing up and down to change the volume or channel. But the inside is completely different, but the user experience remains. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with blockchain is, it's not as established an industry as television, but people understand more and more how to interact with their wallets, and we don't want to disrupt that. What we want to do is make it more secure on the back end.
Hey, Adam?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought I lost you there for a second. Okay, so let's see. So what have the last 6 months at QRL consisted of? How has this like bull run affected actually being a part of a blockchain project? Has it like slowed down momentum? I know here at Cryptoconomy we have a lot more experience with startups than we have with cryptocurrencies in general, and we always say that the most important thing at a startup or the biggest threat at a startup is a momentum swing. For whatever reason, some like sentiment can change from yesterday to today. Now nobody wants to continue this work, and nothing actually changed, but it's just a momentum swing. How would you describe the last 6 months of being a part of a big like downturn?
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, I can definitely say, just joining this industry is very interesting in many ways because it creates time dilation in ways that I've never personally experienced before. What I mean by that is that, a lot of times people say a day in crypto feels like a week.
Right.
A week feels like a month, and a month feels like a year. And 6 months, I mean, it's amazing what a short period of time that is for how differently the world seems from the point of view of the cryptocurrency community. In the past 6 months, we've seen Bitcoin go from 4 figures to 5 figures, back down to 4 figures. Excuse me. And, being something that's as forward-looking as QRL, as a project that's trying to deal with quantum computing and where it intersects with blockchain technology, it's interesting when you go from everybody talking about the present in a positive manner during that mega bull run in the fall to everybody talking about the present in a very negative manner, where people were declaring a week into January that we had started a multi-year bear market.
Yep.
Which to me seems as unlikely as people declaring in October that Bitcoin was going to hit $100,000 and not stop in between. I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion that, and it sort of sticks me in the middle of most economic arguments, that any directional movement that isn't caused by some sort of singular external factor, like a worldwide ban on cryptocurrency or something, um, is going to retrace. Any upward movement is eventually going to pull back a little bit. Any downward movement's eventually going to see a little bit of relief. And I think that cryptocurrency right now is acting kind of like a dryer when you don't separate your sheets right, and it starts rocking from side to side because all the sheets got bundled up, and now we're kind of like a brick of wet clothes in the thing. It exaggerates all market movements. When things go up, they go up maybe more than they should.
Right.
And when things go down, quite possibly the same thing happens. I mean, cryptocurrency will change more in 1 week than the stock market will change percentage-wise in a year.
Right. Yeah, I really like that analogy of the dryer. I feel like this whole economy is so young that we haven't clearly defined the sectors yet. So we have all these different things in the same machine, and they are really getting bundled up together. And some of the downsides of one that might not necessarily apply to the other are just sort of getting lumped together and pulling everything down.
Yeah, I mean, while I sometimes think that some of the parallels drawn between blockchain and the internet are maybe a little bit of a stretch, I definitely think one of the things that's a great parallel is sort of the way the companies that operate in the space are viewed by like mainstream or outsiders, however you want to put it. There was a time when people talked about investing in internet companies, sort of full stop. Today, yeah, exactly. Today that would elicit a laugh because not only do internet companies compete with one another, but an internet company like Amazon has a very different place in the internet economy than another website that might also be quite profitable but not deal in the same sector,
like Reddit or something.
And similarly, yeah, exactly. Amazon and Reddit don't really fight over that much monetization on the internet, but are both wildly successful. Similarly, I mean, a lot of times, you hear people list cryptocurrencies in order and then ask for like, which one would you choose? And to me, they're almost listing like all winners. They're oftentimes listing coins that have nothing to do with one another, are not necessarily direct competitors or even sort of indirect or tangential competitors. And it's just, they're all popular cryptocurrencies, and therefore only one can survive. But I don't subscribe to that sort of Highlander mentality. I think that specialization is something that, as the cryptocurrency economy continues to mature, is going to continue to come into the space, and that projects are going to continue to differentiate themselves from one another and from other sort of tech startups in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the future that you envision for blockchain? Do you think that all these different projects are going to like focus on their own thing, and eventually we're going to say like, hey, like we've figured out that these work really well as platforms. We've figured out these have really like led the front in security. Now let's put them together. Are they going to sort of live in vacuums, independent of each other?
I mean, so full disclosure, I'm an optimist.
Okay.
I think probably most people in this industry are, since it's a forward-looking piece of technology, but I'm inherently an optimist when it comes to these things. So I do think that things will continue to get better. In that sense, and in that vein, I think that there's going to be more specialization, but I don't think it's going to be projects operating in a vacuum. I think that, like a lot of technology, there are going to be meaningful intersections, some of which probably work out better than others, where projects that do different but related things recognize that their users, that A, they may already share a user base, and B, if they don't share that user base literally, that they share a user base figuratively in terms of people trying to solve the same issues. Now, granted, this brings up some of the elephants in the room, like interoperability, the reasonableness of atomic swaps, and just how you get industry to mature that by its very like architecture and technical foundation resists a lot of the specialization, acquisition, conglomeration that a lot of other industries go through. If you broadly look at the development of many different types of industries, technology and otherwise, oftentimes you see an initial starting a group, the pioneers. You then see that usually all try to do everything. Then you'll see specialization. Then you'll start seeing companies acquiring one another. And then you'll start seeing large companies sort of merging together. That can't entirely happen in cryptocurrency in the same way, just because of.
So yeah, after the initial sort of pioneers and specialization stage, you tend to get some type of acquisition and conglomerization in those industries. The architecture and structure of cryptocurrency, in the sense that this is one of the main ways that like coins are not stock certificates, just sort of prevents a lot of that. One cryptocurrency project cannot easily and effectively just acquire another cryptocurrency project. Obviously, talent can move, and talent will always be acquired, because that's just how a labor market works. But, you know, in terms of when you hear about one car company buying another car company or something like that, your sort of more typical type of acquisition, blockchain and cryptocurrency as an industry doesn't really fit into that mold terribly well. Right. However, I will say that if there's a sort of an industry today that's full of people that are ready to find answers to questions that don't really seem to have easy answers, it's blockchain. So I think that will be solved. I just personally don't know how it's going to be done.
Yeah, that's interesting. As these projects get more matured and some projects want to incorporate some of the aspects of other projects, a lot of these projects are open source. So the need to acquire might not necessarily still be there.
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely make a valid point there. And also, obviously, there's the in-between step of, well, we have the open source code base, so we can use it, and then you can find out maybe a couple of key people that helped develop that code base, try to hire them in a contractual capacity to help switch over things from one system to another. I'll admit we're kicking a little bit beyond my coverage as we're getting into some sort of like project development type talk. But yeah, I mean, the broad point I'd like to make is just that the cryptocurrency and blockchain industry is not just dealing with novel technology, but because of that technology's very structure and orientation, it's going to have to find unique solutions to a lot of common problems in business.
Damn. Well, that's great. What is the next milestone at QRL? What are you currently seeing in the short run?
So in the near future, like this summer, for example, the major milestone that sort of dwarfs all the other ones is we're launching our own blockchain. We're launching our own network. Right now, we're in the middle of a security audit, and obviously one cannot rush these things. But the security audit has been going at a very reasonable pace, and upon its completion and the completion of a few other internal milestones, we're going to announce a date and then count down to that date and then launch on that date. And obviously, that is the ultimate culmination of, the inspiration moment where our founder, Peter Waterland, sat down and wrote the white paper in November 2016. And from then to whenever we launch this summer is, that's like stage one of the project in Totem. Stage two is once we have our own blockchain and can attempt to make it the best blockchain that it can be and try to build an open source community around it, try to court secondary layer application developers and sort of see what this all ends up turning into. But we're almost at the end of sort of that first major leg that you have to get through, which is just building the thing.
I see. So initially, when you guys wrote a white paper, then you guys launched an ERC20 token, then you guys raised some money, and then you guys are building your own blockchain. Is that correct?
Close but not quite. So originally, Peter wrote the white paper. Then an initial sort of very rough sketch code base was put out. A pre-sale raise was done, so no ERC20 was not an ICO. It was a private pre-sale.
I see.
Money was raised. This was in April of last year. By the summer, as we all remember, ERC20s were the hot new thing in the street.
Right.
They were providing excellent liquidity for a lot of projects, and some of the pre-sale investors, participants rather, approached the project and said, "Hey, wouldn't it be nice if you guys had an ERC-20 for us to have intermittent liquidity during your development period? And obviously, when you already know everybody's eventual ultimate balance, because all the money's already in hand and you're not selling tokens or anything like that, it was very easy to whip up a smart contract, dispense the ERC-20s, and then we were very fortunate to get listed on Bittrex back when that was not a Herculean feat. And after that, the rest is kind of the history, as you can see on CMC. Once we got exposed to that large of a market, things really kind of took on a life of their own. And it's really been amazing to see how the token has sort of gone on this trajectory of value. The pre-sale price is 8 cents a token. I don't know what we're trading at now, but at the beginning of this podcast, we were trading at 80 cents.
Okay.
And certainly there have been a lot of price movement in between those 2 points. So, yeah, it wasn't the, I guess, stereotypical sort of thing of like write a white paper, hold an ICO, put out, an ERC-20 with that ICO, and then sort of begin development. It happened kind of more interspersed.
I see. So we've had a lot of questions on our podcast, like trying to compare the new paradigm to like the more traditional venture capitalist model, where companies will raise money and then sort of use all this money to fund the development process. How much of that carries over to the crypto world? When these companies raise whenever their token is worth suddenly like a market cap of whatever $100 million, what does a company do in that position? Do they liquidate some of it, or would that look bad and like decrease the price, or what is this sort of the game theory that's going on?
Well, I think you're seeing a very diverse interpretation of that game theory right now. I think you're seeing a lot of projects that are raising, eye-popping amounts of money. And certainly our raise was nice, but the goal priced in dollars was about $4 million, and that's the number that the project hit, which is a lot of money. But compared, by the end of 2017, compared to many ICOs, it almost seems like a paltry sum. And certainly, I think some projects, they've sort of trapped themselves, right? They spend a lot of money on promotion, which helps them raise a lot of money, maybe even more money than they need. And then I think some projects feel the need to continue to stay in the news, to continue to be paid promotions and paid advertisements, because that's sort of what got them there. But, how many projects have gotten A+ ratings on all the major ICO review sites, raise 8 or 9 figures, and then sort of have a paltry opening, maybe even a nice opening on the markets, but followed by like a paltry performance, and then kind of fade away. I think a lot of projects are falling into a lot of the classic pitfalls of traditional fundraising, which is, if you try to raise through traditional VC, you're going to get warned about raising too much money, and also about raising too little, and about getting trapped in a hype cycle, and a lot of sort of things that have become common wisdom in that industry. And in cryptocurrency, people want to try new things, and they're not afraid of breaking some rules. And I think that is one of, if not the emotional strength of this industry. But occasionally, and I think some of the ways people are using their runway for development or other things can be pointed to. Occasionally, in a desire to do things differently, you end up throwing out a little bit of the useful common sense with maybe some of the common sense that's run its course. And so I think you're definitely seeing a lot of the traditional pitfalls of fundraising starting to rear their ugly heads in this industry.
I like it. So it's not really any different than the traditional industry. It's just sort of like that time dilution thing you were talking about earlier, where there's no longer a barrier. So the problems we might have had in the more traditional system are now more exaggerated, since there's not a barrier. Anyone can do it. So the same mistakes people would make about raising too much, raising too little, well, now they can raise from a global market, not any VCs. They have to meet in person. So these people, some of them end up raising way too much, and then now they have to keep up with the hype cycle, and they end up accelerating the FOMO and accelerating the fear in the market.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good way to put it. I might add to that just that there are certain differences that make it very different than traditional fundraising. I think the fact that you're raising from a large, oftentimes anonymous group of people around the world in small increments can have wildly different effects in how you manage the money versus when you got $20 million from a VC fund that has a manager that now sits on your board and sort of watches their money every week.
Mm-hmm.
It's a situation where there is a custodial element and there's a fiduciary responsibility element to traditional finance that both literally and at times figuratively has not translated very well to elements of the cryptocurrency industry, and we unfortunately see that, in like a lot of these scam coins that are trying to just raise a bunch of money in the middle of the night and then sort of disappear. It happens in traditional finance where a VC firm gets fleeced and gets basically conned. But I think we can both agree that that's a fairly rare occurrence, rare enough to be newsworthy, in fact.
Right.
Whereas, sadly, every single scam in the cryptocurrency industry could not make the news, or that would be all that news is.
Yeah, there's enough barriers.
I mean, granted, it's getting better, but
Right, there's enough barriers to entry in the traditional market. You have to be an accredited investor. All these things that require you to do your due diligence, and then somebody suddenly presents to you an opportunity that has no barriers to entry. And then what are people going to do? They're just going to throw money into it. They're not going to try to do their homework. If they wanted to do their homework, they would do their homework in the old traditional system. But I think the conditions are ripe for people to get scams because people have so much. So they're actually so optimistic about this. They have no idea where this is going to go, but they just hear CNBC talking about it every day. They're like, yeah, here, take my money.
And yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of that, but there's also the element of like people are getting quadruple digit percentage returns or quintuple digit percentage returns, and there is this amazing potential for growth. Like the accredited investor thing you brought up, I think that's one of the things that's the best about the ICO model is that, America prides itself on being a freedom-loving capitalist society, and part of the cost of that we sort of socially accept, though I guess it is a greater point of debate these days, is we don't have a very robust social safety net. And that's, I guess that's a matter of political debate that I don't really want to get into, but the fact of the matter is we don't have a robust social safety net. We do expect people to largely pay for their own retirements, and then we turn around and say, unless you're an accredited investor and have, $1 million in assets and $250K a year, or $2 million in provable assets, and whatever, K per year you want, that you are not responsible enough to invest your money to afford to pay for your own retirement. To me, cryptocurrency is sort of addressing that inherent incongruity because something's got to give. Either we need to support people more or we need to enable them more. But right now we're putting the American people in a bind, which is one of the reasons I think America represents the largest and most active group of investors in the world. Is partially because you have people that are expected to sort of finance themselves, but then are oftentimes prevented from doing so.
I really like that. So, how decentralized is QRL? Do you go into an office to work, or is it just log in from the computer? And do you actually know some of the people in person?
So I've had the privilege of meeting the most number of QRL employees of anybody in the project, just because I travel around to the conferences more than anyone else. I haven't met everybody. Hopefully, I will have met almost everybody by the end of this year. But yeah, there is no office. There's no central location. I wake up in my apartment, and that's where I go to work all day. And I think that, once again, that's sort of an acceleration and an exaggeration of what the trend is in many industries. I mean, communal workspaces, companies like WeWork, temporary office space, digital meeting applications, like Zoom and GoToMeeting and all that. These are very popular, and they're growing in utility and popularity every year. And I think that, what you find in cryptocurrency oftentimes where people don't have an office and they work from home, or at least work remotely, whether they choose to work from home or not, I think it's just sort of a little window into the future. Our founding founders are English, British. Our developers are, in Europe as well as India as well as Australia. I don't even know where we put an office if we were to pursue one. But certainly, I really do think it is a benefit, because when we look to hire somebody, there needs to be a language facility. There needs to be certain logistical things met. If you live in an uncommon time zone, you need to be willing to hop on a Skype call every once in a while, maybe in the middle of the night. But by and large, we're able to target the most talented people in the world for what we need. And opening up the talent pool to pretty much almost all of humanity, that's pretty powerful. And I think as that continues to happen in more and more industries, you're going to see a greater and greater concentration of talent, because you're able to actually, find humanity's best.
That's interesting. So I think this actually relates to the time dilution phenomena you were describing earlier. So all like the gravity of this cryptocurrency world, all the talent is getting sucked in here, and as it's gaining more and more gravity, the effects on like the perception of time and how certain things are lining up. I think this is incredible. I just graduated from college a couple weeks ago, and this is the field that like is growing the fastest in terms of recruiting, in terms of like the university trying to open up courses for this, because they feel so behind, because they can't keep up with it. So I don't know. I think cryptocurrencies that are, or not cryptocurrencies, I mean blockchain projects that are doing sort of what you guys are doing and deciding, we're not going to focus on the immediate short run. We're instead going to look forward to this big picture problem that we see out here, this like quantum resistant ledger. I think those are the ones that are probably going to survive, but they're also not going to be the ones that necessarily are talked about in the news, because they're not as sexy or whatever as like these things that are promised to just give you profit tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, not to bash the media too much, although it is quite popular in America these days, but there's a barrier to entry in knowing what a blockchain is for a lot of people still. And then when you add, just using our case, for example, when you add on to that quantum computing, I understand why some news outlets, if they can talk about a coin that says it's going to double your money in 60 days, or if they can talk about a coin that's talking about sort of things like encryption and quantum computing and the future and blockchain and all these words that maybe some of their readers aren't yet familiar with, why they would rather talk about the newest, best thing in the planet, on the world, that turns out to be, the newest Ponzi scheme or whatever. It fits into a lot of narratives that people are more familiar with, and I think first of all, I think that's fine, and even maybe a good thing. I mean,
I agree.
Sometimes it's good to jump in the deep end of the pool, and sometimes it's good to walk down those little steps. And I think people that are trying to jump in the deep end of the pool at this point with cryptocurrency, there's more than enough on the internet to facilitate that. And what we are trying to do as an industry now, in my opinion, what we should be trying to do, not sure if everybody is trying to get those people that are still wearing the floaties and kind of looking at the water weird to like at least dip a toe in. Just get your ankles wet and see what happens. And I think that these stories that talk about cryptocurrency using narratives and words and language that people are more familiar with are a great introductory step in that direction.
Yeah, I agree. People want to hear a story, and you're sort of at the intersection of three kind of really complicated fields. You're at the intersection of technology, of finance, and of physics. So it'd be very hard to form a story out of that that the average Joe can sort of analogize to or relate to. So how can people get involved with QRL? You mentioned that the GitHub is open source, and if people want to learn more, what would you recommend?
Yeah, if people want to learn more, I would say go to our website, theqrl.org. There you have links to all of our social media. Our social media hub is Discord, our Discord server. We also have a Twitter account that posts updates and a Medium blog that fleshes out those updates and provides sort of more nuance to what's going on. Our Discord community is really quite nice, I think, compared to a lot of cryptocurrency communities. We really try to create an informative environment that's not just people singing our praises, but a place where people can feel comfortable talking about, I want to build X or Y on your platform, or here's a support issue, can I get some help, or here's just a question I have about, encryptions and what you guys are using and all that. So yeah, so go to our website. All the information is there. And, hopefully, you'll see us in the news more moving forward as there's a growing awareness around not only blockchain, but quantum computing as well, and sort of where those two things meaningfully intersect.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to include all these links in the podcast description. Thank you so much for coming on today, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.